I thought choosing kindness over boundaries would make me look like the bigger person. Turns out, it may have cost me my marriage. My name is Emily. I'm 31, and 3 days ago, I gave birth to a beautiful baby girl, our first child. My husband, Daniel, should have been the happiest man alive. I should have been wrapped in that bubble of warmth and exhaustion that new parents talk about. But instead, I'm lying here in a cold hospital room replaying the look on Daniel's face as he walked out, his footsteps echoing down the hallway, leaving me alone with our newborn. And the cruelest part? I know exactly why he left. The truth is, I let this situation build up for months. I convinced myself it wasn't a big deal, that Daniel was just being overly jealous. But deep down, I knew. I knew his worries weren't crazy. I just didn't want to admit how much of my heart was tangled in the past. You see, before Daniel, there was Mark. Mark wasn't just an ex. He was my best friend since childhood, the boy next door who knew my secrets before I even knew what they meant. We grew up together, dated in college, and though we didn't work out as a couple, we stayed close. Maybe too close. When I met Daniel, I promised him that Mark was only a friend now. And for a while, he believed me. But the truth is, Mark has always hovered at birthdays, at barbecues, even when Daniel and I started talking seriously about marriage. He was there, smiling, laughing, inserting himself like he belonged. Daniel was patient at first, but after we got engaged, he started drawing lines. He told me point blank, "I don't trust him, Em. He still looks at you like you're his." I brushed it off, maybe even gaslit him a little, saying things like, "You're imagining it," or "Don't be insecure." I told myself I was being mature by keeping my platonic friendship alive. But Daniel wasn't wrong. Mark did look at me differently. He always has. Fast forward to the pregnancy, Mark was there again. Every doctor's appointment, every ultrasound photo I posted, he'd text me first. He dropped off food when I was too sick to cook, insisted on helping with little errands, and, sometimes, he was the one holding my hand while Daniel was still parking the car. I told myself I needed all the support I could get. Daniel works long hours, after all. But when Daniel said, "He's not just helping, Em. He's trying to replace me," I laughed at him. I called him paranoid. And yet, I never really asked myself why I was letting Mark be so present in the first place. The breaking point came the night I went into labor. I was scared, in pain, and frantic. Daniel was rushing me to the hospital, fumbling with bags, calling family, doing everything a husband should. But who did I text first? Not my mom. Not even my sister. I texted Mark. I told myself it was instinct, that he was just my person in moments of crisis. But that tiny choice set off a chain reaction I couldn't undo. By the time Daniel got me settled into the hospital bed, Mark was already there. Somehow, he'd beaten us to it. He walked into the delivery room with flowers in his hand, that smug half-smile on his face, and he hugged me like he belonged there. Daniel froze. He didn't yell, didn't make a scene. But the way his jaw clenched told me I had just broken something inside him. And here's where I made the mistake I will regret for the rest of my life. When the nurse asked who should come in first after delivery, Daniel or Mark, I hesitated. Daniel was pale, sweaty, holding my hand through contractions. He was terrified and in awe all at once. But when I looked at Mark, he mouthed, "Let me just be there for you." So I nodded. I let my ex, my so-called best friend, hold my newborn daughter before her own father did. The nurse placed that tiny, wriggling bundle into Mark's arms, and I watched his face light up like he had been waiting for this moment his whole life. And Daniel? He stepped back. He didn't yell. He didn't fight. He just looked at me, his eyes hollow, and whispered, "You've got to be kidding me." Then he walked out of the hospital room. I thought he'd cool off, come back after a smoke or a cry in the hallway. But hours passed, visiting hours ended, and Daniel never returned. And now, lying here in the sterile glow of hospital lights, I'm realizing I may have lost him. Not because I cheated. Not because I lied. But because I never chose him when it mattered most. And the worst part? Mark hasn't left my side. He's here, holding my daughter, telling me everything will be okay. But the truth is, I don't want him here. I want Daniel. But how do I fix something when I've already shown him where my loyalty really lies? The hours after Daniel walked out of that hospital room blurred together in a haze of exhaustion and dread. I'd just pushed a human being out of my body, but all I could think about was the sound of his shoes against the linoleum floor, fading further and further away. I expected him to come back. At first, I told myself he just needed to cool down, that he was grabbing coffee, calling his mom, maybe even just standing outside trying to get air. But then the clock ticked past an hour. Then 2. Then 4. The nurses checked on me, smiling politely, asking if my husband would be joining us for skin to skin. I nodded weakly, lying through my teeth. He just stepped out. But when visiting hours closed and the doors locked for the night, my bed was still empty on one side. And who was still there? Mark. He sat in the chair beside my bed like he belonged there, cradling my daughter in his arms as if she were his own. He hummed to her softly, a lullaby I remembered from college nights when he strummed his guitar to help me study. Every time I looked at him, a part of me screamed that this was wrong, that I had invited him too far into a space that wasn't his. But another part of me, the exhausted, guilt-ridden, terrified part, clung to the comfort. Mark was here. Daniel wasn't. When I tried calling Daniel, it went straight to voicemail. My texts piled up in a blue bubble graveyard. Where are you? Please come back. The baby's asking for her dad. No response. By morning, I was frantic. That's when my mother walked in, her face flushed from rushing through the lobby. She stopped dead in her tracks when she saw Mark sitting there, holding my baby like some proud father. "Emily," she whispered sharply, "where is Daniel?" Her eyes flicked between me and Mark, confusion twisting into anger. I stammered something about him needing air, about how he'd be back soon. But the look on her face said she didn't believe a word of it. She pulled me aside, lowering her voice to a hiss. "Do you realize how this looks? Your husband is missing, and your ex is sitting here like he's the one who belongs." I felt the tears burn hot against my cheeks. "I didn't mean for this to happen," I whispered. I thought it would be nice for Mark to see her first, since he's been so supportive." My mother's eyes widened. "You let him see her before Daniel?" "Emily, oh my God." She covered her mouth like she was going to be sick. For the first time, I heard the words out loud. And I hated myself. But Mark, oblivious, or maybe willfully ignoring the tension, chimed in cheerfully. "She looks just like don't you think? It's like holding the family we always dreamed of." My mother snapped her head toward him, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "This is not your family." The silence that followed was deafening. Mark finally set the baby back into the bassinet, but not before kissing her tiny forehead. My stomach churned. As soon as he stepped into the hallway to grab coffee, my mom turned to me, her hands gripping my shoulders. "Emily, listen to me. You need to get Mark out of here. Now. Before Daniel thinks he's already been replaced." Her words sliced through me because deep down I knew she was right. Daniel didn't just think it, he'd seen it. With his own eyes. His wife giving another man the moment he should have cherished for the rest of his life. But the thought of sending Mark away terrified me too. Because what if Daniel never came back? What if I was really, truly alone? At least Mark was here. My phone buzzed in my hand. My heart leapt. I thought it might be Daniel. But no. It was a text from his sister. "What did you do, Emily? He showed up at my house last night, completely broken. He won't even look at his phone. He said you chose your ex over him. Tell me it's not true." My throat closed. I couldn't breathe. I wanted to scream that it wasn't like that it was just a mistake, but the words wouldn't come. Because the truth? I had chosen Mark at least in that moment. And now, the man I loved more than anything believed me. Believed the worst version of me. I sat there in that sterile room, staring at my daughter's tiny chest rising and falling, and realized I might have lost her father forever. And then Mark walked back in, holding 2 cups of coffee, smiling like he was stepping into the role he had always wanted. "Don't worry, Em," he said softly, handing me a cup. "You and the baby will never need him as long as I'm here." My stomach turned to ice. Because for the first time, I realized this wasn't just about Daniel leaving. This was about Mark finally getting what he wanted. And maybe I had been too blind or too selfish to see it until now. By the 3rd day in the hospital, The silence from Daniel was louder than any fight we'd ever had. I checked my phone obsessively, refreshing messages that weren't there, calling him again and again only to hear his voicemail. Each time, my chest tightened, the weight of what I had done pressing heavier on my lungs. I had imagined the moment of becoming a mother 1,000 times, Daniel's hand in mine, both of us crying as we looked down at our baby girl. Instead, I was alone, clutching the baby to my chest, wondering if he would ever come back. And Mark? He had only gotten more comfortable in his stolen role. He changed diapers like it was his duty. He introduced himself to nurses as my closest support. When visitors came by, friends from my work, a couple of relatives, he was the one they saw holding the baby, handing her back and forth like he belonged there. I watched their faces shift from confusion to polite disbelief. Some avoided eye contact altogether. No one dared to ask where Daniel was, but I could feel the unspoken judgment in the air. Why is her ex here instead of her husband? Every glance cut me open a little more. But Mark? He thrived in it. The more Daniel's absence stretched on, the more Mark filled the void. He leaned in too close when he spoke to me, brushed stray hairs from my forehead, whispered, "We're a family now. He doesn't deserve you." At first, I tried to ignore it. I told myself he was just being supportive. But the way his hand lingered on mine, the way he kissed my daughter's cheek like she was his, my stomach twisted every time. And still, I couldn't bring myself to push him away. Why? Because the thought of facing the truth, that Daniel might actually be gone for good, was more terrifying than the discomfort of Mark's presence. On the second night, I broke down. My mom had gone home to get some rest, and the baby was finally asleep in the bassinet. I sat there, staring at the hospital wall, my tears spilling hot and silent. Mark slipped into the chair beside me, sliding an arm around my shoulders like he'd been waiting for me to crumble. "Don't cry, Em," he whispered, pulling me against him. "He's not coming back. But you still have me. You always have." I froze. His words were both a comfort and a curse. "Mark," I whispered, trying to sit up straighter. "Don't say that." "Why not?" he pressed. His eyes locked on mine, full of intensity one hadn't seen in years. "You know he was never the one for you. Not like me. I've been here since the beginning. I know you better than he ever will." My stomach churned. This wasn't just friendship anymore. This wasn't innocent. This was exactly what Daniel had warned me about. And the worst part? By letting it go on, by inviting Mark into spaces where Daniel should have been, I had given him the opening to believe he had a chance. I shoved his arm off me, my voice shaking. "Stop. This isn't your place. She's not your daughter, Mark. And I'm not yours." For the first time, his expression darkened. "Not yet," he said quietly. The words chilled me to the bone. Before I could respond, my phone lit up on the nightstand. My heart leapt. It was Daniel. Finally. With trembling hands, I snatched it up, desperate for anything, any scrap of hope. But when I opened the message, my entire body went cold. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't a promise to come back. It was one line. "If you've already chosen him, then you don't need me anymore." My hands shook so hard I nearly dropped the phone. Because in that moment, I realized Daniel wasn't just mad. He wasn't just cooling off. He was done. And Mark, still sitting there, watching me with that smug, patient look, knew it too. The morning Daniel finally came back, I almost didn't recognize him. He walked into the hospital room quietly, no flowers, no balloons, no smile. His clothes were wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot, his face pale like he hadn't slept in days. But what shook me the most wasn't how tired he looked, it was how empty. He didn't look at me. He looked at the baby. She was sleeping in the bassinet, tiny fists curled up by her face. For a moment, I thought I saw his expression crack, like maybe the father in him was fighting its way through the hurt. But then his gaze shifted to the man sitting by my bedside, Mark. And whatever softness had been there vanished. Daniel's voice was flat. "Get out." Mark didn't move. He sat up straighter, resting one arm on the back of my chair like he was staking a claim. "She needs support, Daniel. I've been here when you weren't." Daniel's jaw clenched. "I wasn't here because she took something from me I can never get back." His eyes finally cut to mine, blazing. "You let him hold our daughter before me." The words hit me like a slap. I opened my mouth, fumbling. "Daniel, I was in pain, I wasn't thinking." "No," he snapped, his voice cracking for the first time. "You were thinking. You just didn't choose me." The silence that followed was suffocating. Mark smirked, leaning forward. Maybe she finally realized who's really been there for her. That was it. Daniel lunged forward, grabbing Mark by the collar and shoving him toward the door. The nurses rushed in, my mom shouting, the baby crying. In the chaos, Daniel let him go, his voice shaking with rage. "If you ever come near my wife or my daughter again, I swear," he stopped, his chest heaving. He turned back to me, his voice breaking. "I begged you, Em. I begged you to set boundaries. I told you what he wanted. And you made me feel like I was crazy." Tears streamed down my face. "I didn't mean to hurt you. Please, Daniel. Don't do this. We can fix it." He shook his head slowly, his eyes filled with something worse than anger, disappointment. "I missed my daughter's first moments because of you. Because you couldn't let go of the past. And that's not something we can fix." My knees went weak. "Daniel, please." But he was already walking away, his shoulders stiff, his hands shaking at his sides. I stumbled after him, out into the hallway, ignoring the stares from staff and visitors. My voice cracked, desperate. "Don't leave us. Don't leave me." He stopped at the elevator, his back to me. For a second, I thought he might turn around, might soften, might give us one more chance. Instead, he pressed the button, stepped inside, and whispered just loud enough for me to hear, "You already left me first." The doors slid shut, leaving me staring at my own reflection in the metal. My mother's voice broke behind me, full of fury and grief. "Emily, what have you done?" And Mark, still lurking at the end of the hallway, gave me that same smug look, like he thought he'd finally won. But all I felt was the crushing, unbearable truth. I hadn't just lost my husband. I had destroyed my family before it even began. The days after Daniel walked out of that hospital blurred into a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. I went home with our daughter, but I didn't go home with a husband. His side of the bed stayed cold, his toothbrush still sat by the sink, but he never came back. At first, I told myself he just needed time. That when he held our baby again, when he saw me trying, he'd forgive me. But the first time he came to the house, it wasn't with flowers or apologies. It was with his sister and with papers. Custody papers. My hands shook so badly I could barely hold the baby. "Daniel, please don't do this. We can fix us. Don't take her away from me." His voice was steady, but his eyes were tired. "I'm not trying to take her from you, Emily. I just can't live in this marriage anymore. I'll be her father every step of the way, but I can't be her husband. Not after this." I begged. I cried. I promised I'd cut Mark out, that I'd set boundaries, that I'd finally do what I should have done years ago. But it was too late. Because in his eyes, I'd already made my choice, and it wasn't him. Mark, of course, tried to swoop in. He showed up with groceries, offered to babysit, talked about our family. But every time I looked at him, I saw the man who had stolen what wasn't his to take, and the woman in the mirror who had handed it over to him. One night, after yet another unwanted visit, I finally screamed at him. "She's not yours, Mark. She will never be yours. And I don't want you here anymore." His face fell, twisting into anger before he stormed out. That was the last time I saw him. But the damage was already done. By the time the divorce was finalized, I had lost more than just my husband. I had lost the man who was supposed to stand beside me through the hardest and most beautiful moments of our lives. I had lost the chance for my daughter's father to be there when she took her first breath. And no matter how many times I whispered apologies into the dark, none of it could undo the look on his face when he realized I had chosen my ex over him. Now, months later, I sit alone in a too-quiet house while my daughter spends weekends with her dad. I see him sometimes, smiling at her, holding her with a tenderness I used to take for granted. But he won't look at me the same way ever again. And every time I close my eyes, I replay that one moment, the moment I nodded, letting Mark hold her first. I thought I was being kind. I thought I was being mature. But what I was really doing was betraying the man who trusted me with his heart. Daniel was right all along. Mark never stopped wanting me. And because I couldn't let go of the past, I destroyed my future. So now, when people ask me what the biggest mistake of my life was, I don't hesitate. It wasn't marrying the wrong man. It wasn't keeping an ex as a friend. It was forgetting that love is about choices, small ones, big ones, and the ones that define everything. And I chose wrong. Forever.